Hello, everybody. I hope you're having a good day and you're ready to get into Greyboxing and learn all about it. So I have with me here today Dan.
Hey everybody.
And of course, I'm Cory. And we're going to tell you about the level design process and what Greyboxing is and why people in the industry make Greyboxes. And without further ado, I will open up my presentation here. I put together a little slide deck to kind of make this easier. All right, so I'm going to go through these. So first off, what is a Greybox? You may not have heard this term before, or you might have heard other things like a Whitebox or Blockout. These are all kind of the same thing, and in game development, this means it's a stage of making a level where it's playable, but it only uses basic shapes with little or no color to block out the layout. So if you've heard it called a Whitebox, that is again the same thing, and the terms Whitebox and Greybox refer to the untextured shapes, which are often called primitives, that level designers use to make this rough level layout. And the color of the default texture is different depending on what software you're using. So in Unity, it's kind of a grayish color. In Unreal, there's a bunch of default textures. Some of them are white, some of them are gray. And in Maya, it's like a very flat gray. So if you're using primarily Unity or Maya, you might call it a gray box. If you're using Unreal, you might call it a white box, but it all means the same thing. It's all that rough layout without the detailed textures or art. So why do we make these? Well, game development isn't just like, poof, there's a game. It's a process that happens over several steps. So you don't just make the perfect, beautiful level with all of the finished art and all the particles and the atmospheric lighting and all that. Because if you did that, you might wind up with something that is not really fun to play, and also it's really hard to change now because if you move stuff around, you might mess up the art, or you might break the gameplay. So why we make Greyboxes is that it allows designers to get a sense of how the gameplay flows and make sure that we have a fun game in this level before we commit to the layout of it. And it makes it easy to make changes because if you just have a bunch of basic shapes, those are easy to just move around and you don't have to worry about messing up art, like I said. And also an important part of Greyboxes is that they allow playtesting to happen before art assets are finished. So even if the art team is still working on making stuff, you can test the level, and if there's problems, if there's bugs, or if the players are not enjoying it or they're confused, you can change stuff, and it's really easy to do that. And this also is important for artists because it gives them visual reference for art assets that need to be made for the game. So if you make a level Greybox and you have like an area where you want certain buildings and you want them to look a certain way, but they have to be a certain size, otherwise it'll break the gameplay, the artist can look at your Greybox and see, oh, okay, it needs to be this tall, but it can't be wider than this, otherwise it'll block this thing, or stuff like that. Dan, did you have any comments or things that you found in your experiences?
Yeah, one of the biggest things that is easy to break during the process is actually the way AI traverses a level. So one of the things that is nice about Greyboxing is that you can kind of get an early idea of how that like flow is going to be with player in relation to how the AI moves about the world. But that's also a good opportunity to sort of cordon off things and set some boundaries to say, hey, the AI is going to need this much space to do that gameplay that we already tested. And so if you keep that intact, your Greybox can also kind of reveal what's okay and what's not okay to change in terms of play space for the sake of AI as well. Because even your best AI, your most complicated behavior tree or your most amazing finite state machine is going to have problems traversing when things change. And so it's always nice to be able to stamp that down early on and to be able to keep that intact throughout the process. So Greyboxing is a good way to kind of figure out, hey, how is the AI going to play during this particular level, things like that.
Yeah, for sure. And that's like a really big thing about this stage of level design is that you want to make sure that the gameplay works and works well before you commit to like finished art and making the layout exactly how it is and it can't be changed anymore. Because if you make something that's not fun, no matter how visually pretty and detailed your environment is, it's still not going to be fun. No amount of visual polish will make something that's not fun. So when do we make Greyboxes? Well, this varies. There's no one way to make games, and across the industry there's different standard practices, but a typical process might first look like developing the concept, and that first step is just to find, what are we trying to make here? What kind of gameplay has to happen? Are we fighting enemies here? Are we talking to NPCs? Is there an important narrative event that has to happen in this level? What should it look and feel like? And that's the first step, is just defining those goals. And the next thing that will sometimes happen, it's not always, but often designers will sketch a paper prototype, which might be on physical paper or digitally, and that is a map layout that is often from a top-down perspective. And that helps kind of guide the general flow of where do I want the player to go and what kind of things do I want to include where. And since these are like, it's really easy to just make a sketch on a piece of paper, these can be rapidly made and then, oh, I don't like that one, I want to get rid of it. Let's make a couple changes here and there. It's really fast to iterate on. And often after the paper prototype is when gray boxes will be made. And this is the real, when level building starts in earnest, but it's not with detailed assets yet. So in the game engine, they will use primitives to build the basic structure of the level. If they're working with a paper prototype, they will kind of follow that as a guide for where to place things. Or sometimes people will make 3D models in a modeling software like Maya or Blender, and then export those models into the game engine. For Dawn City Heist, you won't have to worry about any of that stuff. You'll be building directly in the Endless Mission, and all the models for the primitives are already there for you. Sometimes color and lighting are added to give kind of an idea of what we want the look and feel of this level to be. But not always. Sometimes it is just white or gray boxes. And at this stage, the level should be fully playable so that it can be tested. And then after a gray box is made, what happens to it? First, there'll be like an art pass usually. Once we've gone through testing of the gray box and found something that we like and that is fun, then the art assets will start to come in. Artists will develop the assets that don't already exist, and existing stuff that we're going to use will replace that, replace the kind of the ugly white and gray stuff with nice looking textures and details and finished models. And then the level will just go into a repeated cycle of testing and adjusting, and oh no, there's a bug with this part of gameplay, we have to fix that. Oh, these players are getting confused in this spot, so maybe we have to change the location of that a little bit. That cycle of iteration and testing and polishing. And also, additional visuals might be added, stuff like special lighting effects or particles or animations. They might put fog in, and audio might come in at this stage, or it might come in earlier. And the process of improving the level, adding all these nice details and fixing the bugs and just making it better, that's called polishing. So you might hear that term a lot. And the last stage of our development cycle for Dawn City Heist is polishing. Dan, did you have any experiences you wanted to share about your level design process?
Yeah, there's a few little interesting points there. One of them is during the art pass, a lot of times you might start with just a color pass. Like you're not doing textures at that point. You're saying, hey, I know this is going to be concrete, I know this is going to be wood, and you're just slapping some kind of material on there that has those flat textures, because in some cases, like in Unity or Unreal, they have, exposure controls for your camera, or they have, global illumination that you bake. And so it's nice to get that color pass in there so that you can sort of preview, hey, what is the lighting going to look like when we bake it? Is this going to be bright enough? Is this going to bounce correctly? And then also, hey, if we choose a really dark material here and that shoots our exposure up on our player camera, is this going to make this whole area too bright? Things like that. So a color pass is a really quick way of being able to just say, hey, what is this going to do to our virtual camera? And that kind of helps you get out of any weird problems that might come down the pipe if you're committed to this kind of texturing pass and you go, oh man, we really messed up, we have to rethink this. So it's basically you're trying to avoid as many potholes on the road as you can before you get to that final thing. That's a color pass is a really good way of doing that, because you can incorporate with your lighting pass as your textures are coming online, which is pretty cool. And I did want to back up and give a shout out to Elaine Gomez, a designer that we got a chance to work with a few times. She actually was a big proponent of paper prototyping. And she would paper prototype her maps. She would paper prototype puzzles that were in the maps, and she would have people come by her desk and literally interact with those paper prototypes and be able to very early on test, kind of the efficacy of the puzzle. Is it too hard? Is it too easy? And then she would transfer that knowledge when she built something in game, and it was really cool. I don't see a lot of designers that do paper prototyping these days, and while we may not have you turn anything in, that's a paper prototype, it's definitely a helpful tool to explore and have that mental mapping for yourself. It's almost like I would draw a sketch before I jumped into ZBrush to build a character. A paper prototype is a great tool, even for yourself. If it's something that you're stuck on, you can use that to kind of explore a little bit and answer some questions for yourself before jumping in. But you don't always have to.
Yeah, for sure. And I find that especially games where the rooms are kind of segmented in your levels, paper prototypes for the top-down layout of your rooms and things can be really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
So like Dan said, we are not asking you to turn in a paper prototype for any of our tasks, but if you want to, certainly go ahead. It may help you a lot when you're making your Greybox.
There's no extra credit though, so
It's the extra credit of experience.
yeah, it's the personal endeavor extra credit.
Yeah. So here is a personal example of a paper prototype that I made for a level I was developing. As you can see, it's kind of a top-down perspective, and you can see just rough shapes of where I wanted things to be. And I also added like a key for the different colors and like short descriptions of each area. And this was something that I was keeping in mind when I started to build the level as a Greybox. So I'll show that next step here. This was the Greybox that I made in Maya, which is a 3D modeling software. And now you can kind of see the actual 3D shapes of the things that I wanted to include. So it's not super detailed. It's pretty much just flat or chunky models of things. There's like some basic terrain, but you can see some detail with like the shapes of this path that I have going through here, or the buildings. And then you can kind of tell the overall flow of the level just going down this path through the buildings over to this Ferris wheel area, and then off to the right to where the dock and the lighthouse is. And that was ideas that I carried over from the paper prototype, but the layout isn't quite the same. Like in the prototype, you can see it's pretty linear and straight, but this wound up being a lot more zigzaggy than that. And then finally, for this level, I did kind of a color and lighting pass on the Greybox in Unity. So this, even just adding the flat colors to it and some basic point lighting and spotlights do a lot to communicate the mood of the level. So I also threw like a skybox in there so you can see the intended colors, and it does a lot to communicate the atmosphere and how the player should feel while they're moving through this level. Now, it doesn't include really detailed textures or shapes still. Like, all of these are the same shapes that they were in the Greybox. They just have color and light on them now. And that helps bring to life the idea of what this experience is supposed to be like. So, now that you know all about Greyboxes and why they're made, let's show you the process of making one. And I'm going to do this with the Dawn City Heist prototyping kit inside the Endless Mission. So this will be the same process that you guys will go through for the Greyboxing task. All right. So I am in the Endless Mission now. This is the editor. I haven't loaded anything up, but I'm actually going to go to the content panel. So as I talked about yesterday, the way that you can do this is by pausing the game, pressing escape, and navigating to content up here at the top. And you'll start off in the game browser, and this is where we want to be. So the DCH prototyping kit, this one, is what we'll be using to make prototypes of levels for Dawn City Heist. I'm also going to go ahead and grab DCH test, which is kind of a Greybox level that Dan did. Dan, if you want to talk about this while I grab it.
Yeah, sure. So I was trying to see what kind of things we could do in terms of visual storytelling and still make it feel like a heist. Because, you know, the concept of every level being a heist could, on the surface of it, feel pretty limiting. But I think that if you kind of get a little creative with it, you can do a lot more than just, hey, you're stealing this thing, you're going to this location. And it was like, you know, sort of that Dishonored moment where when you play it, you think you're just doing one thing, but each time you go into a level, it's like, well, you're kind of playing with that theme, or you're kind of, you know, playing with the concept of what you're doing there. And so this was sort of like trying to say, you know, how could we push that heist experience to be something more than just a self-contained thing? So yeah, go ahead and play it, check it out.
For sure.
there's not a lot of gameplay in it because I was still just getting to like here's the space I want to play with, and things like that, and kind of the story that I wanted to tell in it. So hopefully that'll give people an example of like how kind of crazy you can get with it while still sort of maintaining that like heist experience or the lore that we're going for.
Absolutely. I haven't played this yet, so I'm excited to see the level.
There's nothing to play really. It's just more of like a, hey, go ahead and take a look, kind of thing. So I actually removed all the drones because I didn't want sort of them to kind of break the experience right now, just being able to look at stuff. That and I broke the drones, so that one's on me. But yeah, let's see if it loads here. If it doesn't, then I'm going to look really dumb. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so the idea kind of here being that you've dropped into this sewage tunnel, and of course, go talk to Oni and find out what you're doing. And she'll tell you, these various things. You're in the Eric's waste treatment facility. Why are you doing what you're doing? And she sort of explains that it's the quickest way to get to this thing called the Panopticon, which is like a big prison. And you're actually, the heist is you're trying to break a prisoner out because you need them for a bigger heist later than the one you're doing right here. And she's like, all right, I'll meet you up ahead. And so, yeah, you're kind of in this big drainage sewer treatment facility. And she told you early on, hey, go to this drain. And you kind of enter down into here, and you can see it's very foggy, very hazy, and there's these big, drainage tunnels. And I was kind of playing with light and distance and trying to show objects that were further away, like that nuclear power facility off in the distance and things like that. And then started to play with, trying to play with cover and things like that. Don't go back there. That's not for you. That's another thing too.
Coin flying around.
Yeah.
Nice.
Oh yeah, that's my bad. But yeah, and then trying to experiment with like, hey, can you do some vertical traversal and things like that? And as we'll find out here, there's a lot of collision problems. So this is really nice to find out early on, so that you can fix it and you aren't sitting here building this tower and make it look all nice, and then you find, oh yeah, I bumped my head on it, I can't go through it anymore. But yeah, this was sort of my early attempt at saying like what would it look like to build something that isn't an enclosed area but like had maybe various enclosed areas to it, and so you'll see this is kind of about where I'd gotten before then. But yeah, trying to show what the shape and space and the layout might be like with just simple shapes and boxes and lighting, and so yeah, I can imagine how to build this out in a whole facility of a waste treatment facility with robots guarding it, and kind of having to get to the end to get to the other side, and then saying, hey, the next level might be you've found your way to the Panopticon, and now you're going into this prison to sort of break out this other mysterious person that you want to find and use in your next big heist. But will they work with you? Probably, because they owe you. So yeah, just having some fun here, trying to experiment a little bit.
Yeah, that's super cool. And you can see that all of these shapes are just primitives. Like there's a lot of lighting effects and some colors in this level, so they don't look super basic, but they are. They're just like, this is a rectangle, and all of the detailed textures are not in yet. But you can still get a sense of what it feels like to walk around through the level, and that's what we're looking for with a Greybox. So super cool. Thanks for showing that.
Thanks.
Let's now go to the prototyping kit. So I played through this a little bit yesterday, but I'm going to play it again. And I'll go through a little slower this time to talk about each of the things that I've included in it. We got plenty of time here, so I can kind of take my time and go slow. So we have the UI included already, and you can edit that. And here's just a big line of some primitive shapes that you can use. You can change these any way you want. You can move them, rotate them, make them bigger or smaller. And you can also find more than what's included here in the library tab. So these are your level structure objects, basically, that I'm suggesting you use for your Greybox because they don't have special textures or things on them. But there's a lot of different shapes that you can play with to build your level. And then if we go all the way back down here to the gameplay objects, there's a couple of ones that are not visible while you're walking around here. There's a wind trigger at the end here, which I would place like at the end outside the exit door. And here is where you will teleport to if an enemy catches you. It's like a respawn point, so if I go and get purposely caught by this drone when he turns around, he'll get me. I will come back here. And then there's an exit door with an exit key, and that'll update the UI in the top left. You can't open this until you have both the exit key and the target treasure. So if I try to open this, it'll have the X icon. Here's just a regular door, which all you need is the key. And a coin, which will also update the UI. And then there's a bunch of different target treasures to choose from. I'm going to fix this weasel because he's kind of escaping his containment chamber here, and also alive. But you can choose any one of these, and we have some lore written up for them in the game design document, which I can link to in the Discord if anyone's interested. You also should have a link to it in the task description, I think. But yeah, we have some power crystals for you to choose from, and this weasel in the tank, and a data core. And all of these, you should only have one target treasure per level. So you can choose which one you want to kind of frame the narrative of your level around. And then we have, of course, a hiding spot that you can jump in and out. And then we have our drone enemies. So I have 2 of these in this prototyping kit. This one will move in a rectangle. He will turn to face each point as he goes along. And then this one just moves back and forth. He'll turn all the way around when he gets to each point. And then finally we have Oni, and she's interactable. She has dialogue that you can interact with her by pressing E. When you do that, she has 4 different options that you can change. When you click one, it will give her response, and she has an animation, and you can set which animation she does when she does each option. And then the final one, she will head out, and then you won't be able to talk to her anymore. So let's take a look at this in the editor. And I'm actually going to build a Greybox so you can see what it might look like to do this process. So I think something I didn't talk about a ton yesterday was how to navigate in the editor. And in case you're not watching this stream, which you won't be able to hear me say this, but the task for Greyboxing does have links to tutorials on how to use the editor. And you can go and reference those anytime you like. You can also come back and rewatch this video if you need help. Or you can contact us on Discord. But the basic controls to move around here, if you press Alt, you'll have this eye icon. And then if you hold the left mouse button, you can look around. If you hold the right mouse button while holding Alt still, you can zoom in and out. And if you hold the middle mouse button, you can move around and kind of drag the screen. Also, if you hold Alt and, that's not Alt, right mouse button and the WASD keys, you can fly around, kind of the same controls that you would for a game, like a first-person game. And if you hold Shift while you're doing that, you can fly around even faster. So this is the WASD keys to kind of zoom around the scene. I personally like to use the Alt and zoom in and out and pan around, but whichever control scheme you use is up to you. It's for you to help navigate the scene. So what we have in the prototyping kit by default is all of these things that I just showed you, and those are all contained in the prototyping kit folder in the hierarchy. I went over this yesterday, but I'll just briefly do this again. The hierarchy is where all of the objects in your game scene are located. So in the prototyping kit, we have a main camera. That's the only camera that we really use for gameplay except for the talk camera for Oni. So you will want to leave that there. And then we have the first-person avatar in here. Gameplay holds the game logic, and you can also put anything that affects the gameplay, like the target treasure or coins, in there. And the scene right now only has the ground plane and directional light, but you can add any of the primitives or things that you add to your level as you go with that. The prototyping kit, you can, if you want, you can move this away. I'm going to move it off of the ground plane because I want to use that for my level. And it contains the area labels and descriptions, which is how you could see the text when I was walking around. If you don't need those, you can just disable them over here in the inspector. And then we have all of our folders. So, Dan, what kind of level should I make? I'm going to grab some primitives.
That's a loaded question, man. Not a sewer level. I'm doing the sewer level. Sorry. No. Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about the Dawn City kind of lore is that there are these floating cities that have multiple layers to them, and there's like richer and poorer areas. They have things like you saw waste control. They have areas of the city that are just partying all the time, and so there's just like a lot of opportunity to tell different kinds of stories or to show different kinds of places and things like that. And so, yeah, you might see something like, oh, yeah, you're going through these sewage drains to get to a prison. Or you might say, oh, you're sneaking along these rooftops during a city festival to steal something. And so I think like you can do a lot there. The sky's kind of the limit because they're floating cities. I'm going to write that one down. But yeah, I don't know. It's what are you feeling like, based on that?
That rooftop idea was kind of cool, actually. I'm gonna make something where you have to jump around between different rooftops, and there's a lot of verticality. That's my goal. Let's do that. So what I'm doing here is I just copied the single wall from the prototyping kit, which is here. So it's over there. I just copied it and pasted it into my scene folder, which is where I'm putting my stuff in my actual level. So now I have 3 walls. One of them is on top of the other one. And I've just been moving these and sizing them the way that I want to. So I'll go over the ways that you can manipulate these shapes. So up here in the upper left, we have the different controls for the transform. The transform is basically what contains all the information about where your object is located and like what direction it's facing and how big it is, basically. So we have 3 different tools for this. And the tools that you see in the scene with the arrows, that is called a gizmo. So right now I have selected the translation gizmo, which you can pull on these arrows to move it along the axes. You can also do these squares to move it along 2 axes at a time, which is really helpful. So if I just want to move this like up and forward and backward, I can do like that, and it won't go this way. But I want this to be on the ground, so I'm going to put it back down about there. Because I want to make a wall here so that the player has to go up. So I'm going to now use the rotation gizmo to turn this. And you can also change these values in here if you know exactly what value you want. So since this rotation is in degrees out of 360, I will just take this 90 degrees to turn it perpendicular to these other walls. Now I'll move it closer to the other walls again. And it's a little too wide. I want it to be just about the same as these other walls. So now I will use the scale gizmo, and I will drag this one to make it just about the same as my little corridor here. That looks good. But I want the player to have to go up and over, so maybe I'll make this a little taller. There we go. But that means I have to put some stuff here for the player to climb on. Let's do a cube. Or a cylinder. Let's do a cylinder.
I don't know, man. It's getting a little crazy. One thing that's interesting here too is that I think this kind of also highlights, why Greyboxing is so important, because I literally cannot picture kind of what Cory's seeing in his head right now. And as he goes, I'm starting to kind of have my own ideas about how to fill this space out and things like that. And like even at this early stage of just seeing this thing, I can imagine this as being like, hey, maybe this is an alleyway that's, you know, behind some buildings, or like, oh, maybe this is a hallway in buildings. Like it could be anything at this point. And so Greyboxing is really helpful because it sort of eliminates those ideas. And then when the art team comes in and starts dressing it up, you know, obviously the level designer has an intention. And so they would have, maybe they'd leave notes in the world. Maybe they would just write up a document saying, hey, this is my intention. But kind of the communication between those two disciplines, you know, the level designers and the artists, sort of like brings that to life together. Because, you know, you can't answer every question with a gray box, but it helps you answer like 90% of the questions, I think. So,
yeah. So what I'm trying to do is make like a little platforming challenge where you have to jump up here and jump up there and jump up here, and then you'll be on the roof. So I'm kind of making a rooftop thing right there. And then I'll make another one over here. So maybe I'll make this a little taller. And something that I ought to talk about here is the views. So in the prototyping kit, I've included a few different views for you. There's the full view, which this will give you everything in the hierarchy that I use. So before, where I was using the simplified view, like on the main camera, you can see the music, but there's something else on the camera that you can't see with this, and that is the shock effect, which plays the little lightning particles when you get caught by a drone. And you don't really need to change that, especially for a Greybox level, so you don't have to look at it if you use the simplified view. There's also the gameplay only view, which will show you gameplay objects like the target treasures and the coins and doors, and you have the drones here. But if you want to build the environment, there's also environment only, which shows you all the primitive shapes, and then in your scene view, it will show you the things that you have in the simplified view. Now, the views have some limitations. Like if you notice in the environment only view, it's set to show you the things that were in the level when I made it for the prototyping kit. Since I'm technically a new user, I'm making a new level here, it doesn't know about the things that I just made in the simplified view. Since I made them in the simplified view, I can see them here. So that's something to be aware of. I'm going to keep using the simplified view. So where is... Oh, another thing. With the full view, you can move objects around in the hierarchy. So I could put this cylinder above this wall, and I could rename this wall roof. Slanted roof. But I can't do that. I can rename it, but I can't move it around if I'm in any of these different views. So that's a limitation there, and that can be kind of annoying. So that's something to keep in mind. And I'm actually building up quite a few assets over here. So what I'm going to do is right-click and go to Create Empty. And what that does is it makes a object that doesn't have anything in it. So it doesn't have any visuals. It's just information, basically. And I'm using this as kind of a folder to group my items. So I'll call this entrance area. And I'll go back to full view so I can group these. I'll grab all of these. So what I did was I clicked on the top one, and then I held shift and clicked on the bottom one, and that selected all of them. And I'll drag that into entrance area. And now I can move this wherever I want, and they'll all go together. So
you should talk about the single most important thing you'll ever do in game development ever.
The copy pasting?
No, saving.
Saving. That is more important. That is true.
Early and often, yes.
Yes, that is a great point. So I've made some significant process here. This is significantly different than it was when I opened the kit. So I'm going to save this because I want to keep working on it and I don't want to lose my progress. So I will call this Cory. Can you do apostrophes in here? Yes, you can. Cory's new level. think the naming convention that I'm asking people to use is DCH, year level name, Greybox. So DCH, Cory's new level Greybox, is what I'm going to call this. And I'll save it. And I'll let that finish. And now it'll have the new name up here. And if I go to load game, give that a second to come up.
Go to load game, it'll crash.
That's why we save. So if I scroll all the way down, here's my level, and I can reload this. And it's exactly the way I left it. So great. Thank you for mentioning that, Dan, because that's absolutely, do that as much as you can remember to. Anytime you think, maybe I should save immediately.
Yes. Yeah, and another thing too that you can do is if you are going to make a big change that you're not sure about, or you're going to experiment with something, you can save an iteration as well. So, _01, _02, so that you have those other ones as a backup in case you're like, I built this whole part and I didn't like it. I'd like to not have to try to pull it out of this level. I'd like to go back to the version before that. Think those kinds of things. Or, hey, I built this thing and it broke my level. I'm not sure why. It's always good to have those backups as well. So saving and loading is probably something I dream about. I've messed it up so many times in my career, so it's always good to stay on top of that. Yeah.
Okay. The final thing I'm going to do, I'm going to duplicate this and call it Rooftop. And I'm going to do 0, not 0. That's not what I want. Also not what I want. That's what I want. And I'm going to put this up at the top for my rooftop platform. And I'll stretch that out. Whoops. Stretch that out. I could just use a cube here, that would be simpler, but where's the fun in that? Okay, maybe I'll make this jut out a little bit. Okay, so now I have kind of this alleyway where what I want the player to do is go up here, jump on this cylinder, jump up here, jump over here, and jump on top of the roof. But I don't actually know if that's possible, so the nice thing about Greybox is I don't have any detailed assets here, but I can test to make sure this works. So let's see if I can actually make these jumps. That one. That one. Oop. I might be able to make that. Let's try it again. Might be too hard.
Yeah. Running down slopes definitely is harder to jump from. So,
but it looks like I can actually.
It works perfectly.
I can make it. So I think that's okay for now. Now I notice it's a little hard to tell where the surfaces begin and end because they're all white, because this is a white/gray box. But I think I can make that easier to see if I move the directional lighting a little. So I'll do that. Where is my directional light? At the top of this scene. Now, this is an example of an object you can't really see. You can see a gizmo here, but there's nothing there. That's because it's a light. But that doesn't mean that it's not there. So if I rotate this, you can imagine that as the sun, and it kind of looks like that in the sky. And if I rotate it, it changes where the sun light source is shining from. So if I make that, let's do really dramatic shadows, because I think that will make it easier to see. Maybe not completely.
Yeah, anytime you have parallel surfaces that are flat like that in the same material, you will run into some amount of problems there, like we're seeing, because the sunlight is a completely parallel light source. It's not like a point light or a spotlight that has an angle to it. This is going to come from a completely parallel direction, and it's going to hit that surface exactly the same way if that surface is the same angle. So we'll probably see that issue on any flat parallel surfaces. So there may be ways around that, adding bumps to the surface, like little blocks or things like that, or curving the surface or angling the surface.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. I think what I want to do is add little raised like beveled edges to the edge of my rooftop. And what I can do is I can go to my library, because I don't think I have a shape like this over here. So I'm going to the library and I just hit the shape filter. And now I can see the full list of primitive shapes that come with the Endless Mission. So I think somewhere in here there's a hollow full cube. Yeah, that's what I want. So what this will do, because I think, right, a bottom on it or no? It does have a bottom. So I can actually, I'm going to delete my rooftop that I made. Oh, can I not delete it? Here's another problem with the simplified view. Sometimes you can't get rid of things because it's part of the view. So I'm going to use the full view for a moment here. Uh-oh. Well, that's unusual. What? Huh.
It's not letting you select anything.
Nope.
Does it let you select it if you're in the simplified view? Or are selections kind of...
No, it's not letting me select anything.
Probably want to save and load again then, just to kind of give it a fresh start. Yeah, there are a few little snags in the hierarchy that come up every once in a while, but for the most part, it's pretty stable. But I feel like this stream is going to make me eat those words.
Okay.
See if that helps at all.
Uh-oh.
Still having issues?
Yep.
Can you select it in the world?
Let me go full view. Huh. Yes.
So you are able to select it in the view, but the hierarchy is giving you trouble.
Strange. Okay, well, let me see if I can work with this. But I do need to delete things. So let me delete that. Interesting. Okay. Can I move this?
On the bright side, we literally just recorded the repro steps for that bug, so we can send that to the engineers.
Yep, that's interesting. So it selects in the hierarchy when I click on it, and then I can interact with it. So anyway, I'll just call this rooftop. Build my old rooftop. And now I'm going to... Oh, another thing that I mentioned last time but haven't yet. So if you press Shift F, you will zoom in on whatever object that you have selected. And that is really helpful. So what I want is for these to be kind of short, beveled edges on a big rooftop. There we go. And I'll put that down here.
Nice.
Of course, this building doesn't have walls, but that's okay. Who needs walls?
So early days.
Yep. Okay. So I have my rooftop here. Move that a little that way. And now I want another building. I am going to put walls on the next building that I do. So I'm going to grab a... Oh, I can't. Can I not do that anymore? Huh.
Definitely feels like it might be in a weird spot right now. Can you check the console? Maybe there's something going on there. No, the level console, which is the tab up there by the hierarchy. See if that actually...
Console. Oh, here we go.
So you have something there.
Set active.
Oh, I think that might be a result of the warnings up there too. It looks like it might have gotten confused on one of the archetypes behind the scenes. So, yeah. This comes into play a little bit more if you're doing custom coding, which we're not going to be doing for this, but this is an area that you can see basically if there's any warnings or reports or debug logs that you put in yourself. In our case, we're seeing a null reference, which means a script is trying to reference something that is not there anymore. But that is actually not due to something Cory has done. It's a null reference that has to do with the editor itself, which means that I got to go message our programmers and say, help. So, but for now, I think we might be able to work around it.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to drag in a new cube and put that over here. And let's just make that really big. Here we go. And I'll take another... Let me move this cube into... Oh, where's my... Here. And I'll duplicate that rooftop and put it... Let me parent this so that it stays with the cube wherever I put it. So I think this jump may not be doable, but we'll see.
One thing that we didn't talk about a lot, we kind of touched on, that Greybox is really good for is finding out just pacing in general. The time it takes the player to do any given thing is always something you want to be worried about when you're building something. And even just walking from point A to point B is something that is very nice to test early on to say, hey, does this feel like it's taking too long, or did I not give it enough time? Because if your player is not doing anything for a long time and you're not doing any sort of visual storytelling during a traversal experience, then you have to evaluate if that needs to be there or not.
Ooh, just barely. I think I want that closer because I don't want the player to fall.
That would be a hard jump, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to make that easier.
Now, have you thought about what you want to have happen if the player does fall there?
So what I think I want is for falling to be an additional hazard. And if you fall, you have to start back at the first rooftop. Mm-hmm. So what I can do... Is there one in this scene already? Where would that be? That would be in the prototyping kit. There's not one. Maybe I'll put that in the prototyping kit. But I'll show you what I am thinking of. Oops. So let's... how do I want to do this? Okay, I'm going to make an empty object. So I'm actually going to start populating the gameplay here. And let me create an empty, and I will call this... Fall... Death... Collider? I'm not actually going to kill the player, I'm just going to do a little bit of damage, but let's find... So I'm going to search in the library, box, collider, and grab this box collider component, and drag it right onto my fall death collider. And what that does is that gives it this little green box. Now, when I play the game, I won't be able to see this, but this helps me visualize where the bounds of my fall death collider are going to be. So what I'm doing is I'm going to make this bigger because I want this to span most of the level, and I'll make it like that. So now I might have to make another one to put over here if you fall off this way, but for now I'll put this over here, and I will add another component to it, which is... Actually, there might be a better way to do this, because I want it to teleport. Teleport. Hazard teleporter. That's what I want. We're doing this in real time. I don't actually know if this is the best way to do this, but I'm going to try. I think I will need to add this object to the prototyping kit so that you guys don't have to do what I'm doing right now. Ooh, come on.
Yeah, the tricky thing about it is there's like 1,000 different right ways to do something. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it really is about just kind of sussing out what works best for your situation. But, we do have some components in there like the hazard teleporter that could come in handy if you're trying to do stuff like that. Though Cory can build that same kind of functionality manually if he composed it differently with some of his own,
Oh, it looks like I can select again. That's nice. So
all you needed was a hazard teleporter.
What I'm going to do now, I'm not going to copy and paste this because I only want there to be one in the level and it's already set up to work. I'm going to take my start respawn point from my prototyping kit, and I'm in the full view so I can do this. I'm going to move this to gameplay, So it's next to my Fall Death Collider. And I'm going to move it over here and up here. And you'll notice when I was playing the level, I couldn't see this, but I can see this in the editor, that there's a little kind of destination marker. So I'm going to put that right there. And that is where my player will respawn if they get caught by a drone, or in this case, if they fall. So this Fall Death Collider, in its teleport to section, I'm going to put start respawn point, and I'll have it deal 10 damage is fine. And I don't want it to teleport drones. No drones are going to fall down there, but if they did, I don't want them to teleport. And the collider component is already on the Fall Death Collider, so I'll drag itself into there. And let's see if this does what I want it to. Oh, I never moved my building, but it did not. Oh, I think I know why. Because my box collider is not set as a trigger. And so a box collider, you can think of a collider as having kind of two modes. And one of those will have it be solid, so you can't move through the object, and that's what it is right now. That's the default mode. But if you select is trigger, a trigger will be permeable, so you can walk through a trigger. And what they're usually used for is like an invisible area that fires an event or triggers an event when you go through it. So what I want to happen is when you trigger this box collider, it will teleport you to the start respawn point right there. Let me see if that did it.
Now, does that, I can't remember the hazard teleporter. By default, does it do that if it's connected to a box collider that is set to trigger, or do you have to send it an event yourself? I guess we'll find out.
It does it automatically, I think. I'm just going to run over here. There we go. There we go. So you will actually, it will play the shock effect because that's what happens when you get damaged. But that's fine. We can put like an electric trap down there or something. Cool, so that worked. So now, we are almost at the end of our time here. And the last things that I'm going to show are setting up the UI. So we have in our game logic, I think, start and end UI. And if we open this dropdown, we have a simple intro screen. And in this, I'm in the simplified view, so I don't know if I can see this. Let me look at the full view. There we go. Is it in here? Yes. So there's a title and a description and a continue button. So the title is where you put your level name. I'm going to call this Rooftop. What are we stealing here? Let's say there's a power crystal up here. Power heist. That's the name of my level. And the description, let's say navigate treacherous rooftops. Find power crystal and get to Oni's ship to get out. And then I'll just leave that to say continue or whatever it says. And then I'm going to take the end UI, the heist complete, go down in this same place, and the title, job complete, that's fine. And instead of this generic, you escaped with the target treasure, I'm going to say you escaped with the power crystal. Let me save that. And now when I play, of course I don't have a wind trigger or a power crystal in this area yet. But now it'll say Dawn City Heist, Rooftop Power Heist. Navigate treacherous rooftops, find the power crystal, and get to Oni's ship to get out. And now that's what it'll say at the beginning of the level. And if I were to actually win, it would give me the the win text that I put in there.
And now it kind of seems like you've volunteered me to make Oni's ship from scratch. Thanks for that, Cory.
Yeah, no worries. So there's, of course, all this other stuff that goes into a Dawn City heist level. And in your Greyboxes, I would like to see an example of each of the mechanics. So in the task description, it says like at least 2 drones, at least 5 coins, stuff like that. So when you want to grab those things, you can copy and paste them from the gameplay objects in the prototyping kit. So I could say I want this ruby power crystal, copy this, and I will paste this over here. Then I have to drag it over here. Let's just put it up here. There we go. And I will also... What else do I want? I want a drone. This is a terrible place for a drone right here, but I haven't made the rest of my level yet, so let's just grab one from the enemies section, which I just lost. Here it is. Let's just grab a back and forth one and copy him and paste him and move him over here. So let's put drone. So this is going to be like totally unplayable when I'm just doing it to show an example. How you mess with these drones to customize them. I'm going to open up the full view so I can see the rest of his attributes. And now I see his patrol nodes. And here's where he starts. Here's the first one. And here's the one where he goes to and turns around. And if I move this, now he won't go past the rooftop. So he will just patrol back and forth here. And then he's got all these yellow boxes around here. That's where he will turn around if he sees you and starts chasing you, but he gets to one of these boxes, he will go back to his patrol route once he touches them. So that is to help the player. If you manage to escape and get into a different room, you will not be chased anymore. So if you were on our Dishonored stream, or if you've played other stealth games, you may notice that sometimes it's really hard to reinitiate stealth after you've been spotted. And what I wanted to do to mitigate that is allow you to reinitiate stealth very easily in this game. So that's why they have the territory bounds. And this final one, this box that's kind of out in the middle of nowhere, the reason that is there is because when the player respawns and gets to their respawn area, I want that to be a safe place. So if the drones somehow manage to get past their territory bounds and escape, if they get to where the player respawns, they will turn around again and go back to their patrol. So that's pretty rough, but this should work. Oh, we got 1 minute here. Okay, speed run.
Let's go. Speed run. Yeah.
Okay. Now we can hear him going. Buddy. I guess it's not unplayable. He's still pretty slow, but if he catches me, I'll spawn over here and then he'll go back, watching me.
Kind of giving you the evil eye there.
Yep. If I get this, it'll update in the UI, and there's still no win trigger because the win is supposed to be outside the exit door, which is currently over there with the rest of the prototyping kit. But if I were to put that there, then I could win. So that is an introduction to how Greyboxing works. And this is what your levels kind of might look like with all these primitive shapes and the gameplay objects that you need to be able to play. So I hope that was informative and helpful for you. And thank you very much to Dan for hanging out and giving his commentary and showing us his version of a Greybox. That was really cool.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for listening to my long speeches about nothing. So,
yeah, I'm excited to see what you guys create for Dawn City Heist. Thanks for tuning in.